The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep sound that echoed through the hall. Ambassador Kale walked slowly inside, his blue skin looking pale and tired. His usual bright eyes were now dull with worry and fear. Behind him, two other Viridian officials followed, their heads down in shame. The council chamber was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up like stairs. Representatives from 50 different alien species sat in their places, waiting to hear what the Viridians had to say. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew something terrible was happening in the Vega system. Counselor Prime Nexus, a tall being with silver skin and forearms, looked down at Kale from the highest seat. His voice was deep and carried across the entire chamber when he spoke. Ambassador Kale of the Viridian people, you may speak your request to this council. Kale stepped forward to the center of the chamber. His hands were shaking slightly as he activated the holographic display. Images filled the air above him, showing the beautiful crystal cities of his homeworld. The cities sparkled like diamonds, under their twin suns, with tall towers that seemed to grow from the ground like trees. Honored members of the council, Kale began, his voice breaking slightly. For 300 years, my people have lived in peace. We have shared our healing knowledge with all who asked. We have opened our doors to travelers and traders from across the galaxy. We have never raised weapons against anyone. The images changed, showing the same cities, but now they were burning. Massive ships hung in the sky above them, firing down with weapons that turned the crystal towers into dust. Bodies lay in the streets, and smoke rose from what had once been homes and schools. The Crimson Horde came to our system 6 months ago, Kale continued, his voice getting stronger with anger. They did not ask for anything. They did not try to talk. They simply began destroying everything we had built. A representative from the Reptilian Saurid Empire leaned forward. How many ships do they have? Over 200 warships, Kale replied. Their smallest vessels are twice the size of our largest cargo ships. Their warriors are 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor. They fight with weapons that can melt through steel like it was paper. Murmurs went through the chamber. The Crimson Horde was known throughout the galaxy, but they had never attacked a council member world before. They usually stayed in the outer regions, raiding smaller colonies and independent systems. Kale changed the images again. Now they showed the Horde warriors themselves. They were huge, with red and black skin that looked like metal plates. Their faces were hidden behind masks that had sharp teeth painted on them. In their hands, they carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy. They take no prisoners, Kale said quietly. They do not want our resources or our land. They simply want to destroy us. My people are dying, and we cannot stop them. Chamber fell silent. Everyone could see the pain in Kale's eyes. The Viridians were known as gentle healers and wise teachers. They had never developed weapons of war because they had never needed them. Counselor Prime Nexus spoke again. What do you ask of this council? Military aid, Kale said simply. We need warships and soldiers. We need someone to help us fight back against the Horde before they kill everyone in our system. That followed was uncomfortable. Representatives looked at each other, but no one spoke. Finally, General Vrak of the Mantis Federation stood up, his insect-like head turned toward Kale. The Federation has only 30 ships available, he said in his clicking voice. They are already protecting our border worlds from pirates. We cannot spare them. Commander Thane of the Tiger Clans nodded. Our warriors are brave, but they are few. We have maybe 500 soldiers we could send, but that would not be enough against the Horde. One by one, the other representatives gave similar answers. Some had ships but no soldiers. Others had soldiers but no ships. Most had neither to spare. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and everyone had their own problems to worry about. Kale's shoulders dropped as he listened to each refusal. His people were dying while the council made excuses. He had traveled across the galaxy, hoping for help, but it seemed like no one could or would save his world. Then, from the back of the chamber, a quiet voice spoke up. What about the humans? Everyone turned to look at Counselor Zeta, a small, gray being with large black eyes. She was the representative for the newer species in the galaxy, those who had joined the Council in the last 100 years. Counselor Prime Nexus looked puzzled. The humans. They have been part of the Council for less than a century. They are traders and diplomats, not warriors. But they have ships, Zeta said, and they have people who know how to fight. I have read their history files. General Varrock made a sound that might have been laughter. Those files are surely exaggerated. No species could have fought as many wars as the humans claim to have fought and still survived. Their homeworld has large armies, Commander Thane added. But they have never been tested in real combat against a proper enemy. The Crimson Horde would crush them easily. Counselor Prime Nexus held up one of his 4 hands for silence. The humans are still learning galactic politics. It would be wrong to send them into such danger when they are not ready for it. But Counselor Zeta was not finished. She stood up from her seat and walked down to the center of the chamber, standing next to Kale. I have spent time on their homeworld, she said. I have seen their military bases and talked to their leaders. Gosh, there is something about them that the files do not explain. Something that makes other species nervous when they are around humans. She activated her own holographic display. Images of Earth appeared in the air, showing cities and forests and oceans. But then the images changed to show huge armies marching, massive weapons being tested, and ships being built in numbers that seemed impossible. They have weapons we do not understand, Zeta continued. They have soldiers who train for wars that have never happened. When I asked their leaders why they needed so many weapons, they just smiled and said it was better to be ready. The chamber was quiet again, but this time, it was a different kind of silence. Several representatives were looking at the images with new interest. Kale stepped forward. If the humans are willing to help, I will accept their aid. My people need someone, anyone who can fight the Horde. Counselor Prime Nexus thought for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. Very well. We will send a message to Earth. If they choose to send military aid to the Vega system, the Council will approve it. But he added, looking directly at Kale, we cannot promise what kind of help they will send. The humans are still unknown to us in many ways. Kale nodded quickly. Any help is better than no help. My people will be grateful for whatever they can do. As the council session ended and the representatives began to leave, none of them noticed Counselor Zeta's small smile. She had read more than just the public files about humanity. She had seen the classified reports, the ones that talked about Earth's darker history. The galaxy was about to learn something new about their newest members. Kale was about to discover that sometimes, when you ask for help, you get exactly what you need, even if it is not what you expected. The message from the Galactic Council arrived at Earth's Terran Defense Command at exactly 0800 hours on a cold Tuesday morning. Admiral Torres sat in his office reading the holographic display for the 3rd time. His coffee had gone cold while he stared at the words that would change everything. Military assistance requested. Immediate deployment needed. Crimson Horde threat level. Extreme. Torres was a man who had seen 40 years of military service. He had gray hair, deep lines around his eyes, and scars on his hands from battles most people had never heard of. He knew what the Galactic Council was really asking for. They wanted Earth to send soldiers to die in a war they could not win with normal methods. He pressed a button on his desk. Get me General Hayes and Colonel Park. Emergency meeting in Conference Room 7. 20 minutes later, 3 of Earth's most senior military officers sat around a metal table in a room deep underground. The walls were thick concrete, and no electronic signals could get in or out. This was where Earth's darkest secrets were discussed. They want us to fight the Crimson Horde, Torres said, sliding data tablets across the table. Intelligence reports show the Horde has over 200 warships and maybe 50,000 warriors. They have been conquering systems for 3 centuries. General Hayes, a tall woman with short black hair, looked up from her tablet. Our regular forces would be slaughtered. The Horde fights with tactics we have never seen. They use fear as a weapon and take no prisoners. Colonel Park nodded. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. Conventional military response would fail. We need something different. Torres leaned back in his chair and looked at both officers. I am thinking about Protocol 7. The room went silent. Hayes and Park looked at each other, then back at Torres. Protocol 7 was something they had hoped never to use. It was created after the last global war, when Earth's leaders realized they had created weapons and trained people who were too dangerous for normal society. Sir, Hayes said carefully, Protocol 7 has never been activated. We are not sure it would even work. The risks are enormous, Park added. Those people were locked away for good reasons. If we let them out, ... Torres stood up and walked to the wall screen. He pressed a button, and images appeared showing the destruction in the Vega system. Cities were burning, ships were exploding, and bodies were floating in space. The galaxy is asking us to help, he said quietly. If we send normal soldiers, they will die and achieve nothing. If we do nothing, an entire species gets wiped out. But if we use Protocol 7, he turned back to face the other officers. We send the most dangerous humans alive to fight the most dangerous enemy the galaxy has seen. Let the monsters fight each other. Hayes was the first to speak. Public can never know about this. If word gets out that we are releasing war criminals and psychopaths, ... the public will never know, Torres said firmly. This mission does not exist in any official records. The soldiers involved will be listed as volunteers from Special Forces. Eunice Park was reading through the Protocol 7 files on his tablet. His face was getting pale as he scrolled through the names and crimes. Some of these people are completely insane, he said. Others are so dangerous that even maximum security prisons struggle to hold them. Torres nodded. That is exactly why they are perfect for this job. The Crimson Horde has never fought anyone like them.
The selection process
began immediately. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in facilities that did not appear on any map, the most dangerous criminals in human history received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Miller was a small woman with blonde hair and thick glasses. She looked like a librarian, but she was actually the head of Earth's psychological warfare department. She walked through the corridors of Facility Black, reading files on her tablet. The first cell she stopped at held a man named Jack Morrison. He was tall and thin, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through people. He had been a sniper in 3 different wars before he went crazy and held an entire city hostage for 72 hours. Morrison, Dr. Miller said through the reinforced glass, I have an offer for you. Jack looked up from the book he was reading. I am listening. There is a war happening in space. We need someone who can kill from long range without being seen. In exchange for your service, we can reduce your sentence. Jack smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Many people do you want me to kill? The next cell held Lisa Chen, a demolitions expert who had made 3 military bases disappear without leaving any evidence. She was small and looked young, but her eyes were cold and calculating. Chen, Dr. Miller said, we need someone who can blow things up in creative ways. Interested? Lisa stood up from her bed and walked to the glass. What kind of things? Spaceships? Weapons? Anything that belongs to the enemy. Lisa's smile was even more frightening than Jack's. I accept. In the maximum security wing, Dr. Miller found Victor Petrov. He was a huge man, with arms like tree, trunks and hands that could crush bones. He had killed 17 men with his bare hands during a prison riot. The guards always stayed far away from his cell. Petrov, Dr. Miller said, we need someone for close combat work. Very close combat. Victor looked at her through the small window in his door. Will I get to use my hands? He can use whatever? Methods you prefer? Victor's laugh was deep and scary. When do we start? The selection continued for 3 days. Dr. Miller and her team went through files on hundreds of criminals, choosing only the most dangerous and effective. They found Maria Santos, who could kill people with poison and make it look like natural causes. They found Tom Blake, who could break into any computer system and turn it into a weapon. They found Anna Wolf, who could torture information out of anyone without leaving marks. Each person they selected had been judged too dangerous for normal society. They were murderers, terrorists, war criminals, and psychopaths. But they were also experts in their fields of violence. By the end of the week, 50 people had been selected. They were brought to a secret military base in the middle of a desert where no one could see or hear what was happening. The briefing room was underground, with concrete walls and no windows. The 50 selected criminals sat in metal chairs, looking around at each other with interest. Many of them recognized each other from news reports or criminal records. Admiral Torres walked to the front of the room. Behind him, a large screen showed images of the Crimson Horde and their weapons. "You are here because you are good at killing," he said simply. "The galaxy has a problem that needs your particular skills." He pressed a button, and the screen showed the destruction in the Vega system. "This enemy has conquered 47 star systems. They show no mercy and take no prisoners. They are bigger, stronger, and better armed than normal humans." Jack Morrison raised his hand. "What is the catch?" Torres smiled coldly. "There is no catch. You get to do what you do best, and we will call it saving the galaxy. Your crimes will be forgotten, and you will be heroes." Lisa Chen laughed. "This sounds too good to be true." "It is true," Torres replied. "You will be given the best weapons Earth has ever made. You will have a ship that can travel faster than anything. The galaxy is seen, and you will have complete freedom to use whatever methods you think are necessary." Victor Petrov cracked his knuckles. "When do we leave?" Torres looked around the room at the 50 most dangerous people on Earth. "Tomorrow. The ship is ready, the weapons are loaded, and the galaxy is waiting." As the criminals were led away to their final preparations, Torres watched them go. He knew he was unleashing something terrible on the universe. But sometimes he thought you had to fight fire with fire. The galaxy had asked for help. Now they were going to get it. The ship called Pandora's Box dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system like a shadow appearing in the night. It was completely black, covered in materials that absorbed light and scanner beams. To anyone looking for it, the ship simply did not exist. Captain Ross stood on the bridge, looking at the tactical display that showed the Crimson Horde fleet. 237 ships hung in space around the Viridian homeworld like hungry wolves around a wounded deer. The largest ships were over a mile long, covered in weapons and armor that could destroy entire cities. "Analysis complete, Captain," said Lieutenant Green, the ship's intelligence officer. "The Horde has been bombing the planet for 6 months. Estimated civilian casualties are over 2 million and rising." Behind Captain Ross, 50 of Earth's most dangerous criminals watched the display with interest. They were no longer wearing prison uniforms. They wore black combat suits that made them look like walking nightmares. Each suit was packed with weapons and equipment that the galaxy had never seen before. Jack Morrison studied the enemy ships through a telescopic scope. "Big targets," he said quietly. "Lots of weak points if you know where to look." Lisa Chen was examining the explosive devices in her equipment pack. "Their ships are old designs," she noted, probably not expecting internal sabotage. Victor Petrov cracked his knuckles and smiled. "When do we start killing?" Captain Ross turned to face the group. "Your mission is simple. Destroy the Crimson Horde fleet and save the Viridian people. How you do it is up to you. The only rule is that there are no rules." The criminals looked at each other and grinned. They'd spent years locked in cells, dreaming of the day they could use their skills again. Now that day had come. On the Horde flagship, War Master Brutus studied reports from his commanders. He was 12 feet tall, covered in natural armor that looked like red metal plates. His face was hidden behind a mask with sharp teeth, and his eyes glowed like coals in the darkness. "The Viridian cities are almost completely destroyed," reported Captain Grack, one of his ship commanders. "Their population centers have been reduced to rubble. Soon we can begin the final ground assault." Brutus nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Once we finish here, we will move on to the next system. The galaxy will learn to fear the Crimson Horde." He did not know that death was already moving through space toward his fleet. The first attack came at 0300 hours, ship time. Horde supply convoy was traveling between the outer planets, carrying food and ammunition to the main fleet. It consisted of 12 large cargo ships protected by 6 armed escorts. The convoy commander, Captain Vex, was reviewing supply reports when his communications officer suddenly looked up from his console. Sir, we are receiving a distress call from Transport 7. What kind of distress? Vex asked. Unknown, sir. The signal just stopped. Vex frowned and looked at his tactical display. Transport 7 showed as a green dot moving normally with the rest of the convoy. Send a message. Ask for their status. No response, sir. Take us closer for visual. Inspection. As Vex's ship approached Transport 7, they could see that everything looked normal from the outside. The cargo ship was still flying in formation. Its lights were on, and its engines were working properly. Scan for life signs, Vex ordered. The scanner operator worked at his console for several minutes, then looked up with confusion. I am not reading any life signs on that ship. That is impossible. There were 400 crew members on that vessel. They docked with Transport 7 and sent a boarding party across. What they found made even the hardened Horde warriors sick to their stomachs. The crew was dead, all of them, but there was no sign of fighting. No weapons had been fired, no alarms had been triggered. The crew had simply died where they stood, as if death itself had walked through the ship. By the time the boarding party reported back, 2 more ships in the convoy had gone silent. Captain Vex tried to contact the main fleet, but his communications were being jammed. He ordered his remaining ships to form a defensive circle, but it was too late. One by one, the ships in the convoy went dark. The crews died silently, without warning, without explanation. When the sun rose over the Viridian homeworld, the entire supply convoy was drifting dead in space. The second attack came 2 days. Later, a Horde patrol squadron was investigating strange readings near the asteroid belt when their lead ship suddenly exploded. Not from weapons fire, but from the inside out, as if someone had placed a bomb in the engine room. Remaining 4 ships in the squadron tried to retreat, but they never made it home. Searchers found them a week later, floating empty in space, with their crews dead and their computer systems wiped clean. War Master Brutus stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. In 5 days, he had lost 18 ships and over 3,000 warriors, but he had no idea what was killing them. Sir, said his intelligence officer, a smaller Horde warrior named Scar, we have analyzed the wreckage from the patrol squadron. The explosions came from inside the ships. Someone placed explosives in their engine rooms. Impossible, Brutus growled. Our ships are heavily guarded. No one can get aboard without being detected. The evidence suggests otherwise, sir. Someone is moving through our fleet like a ghost, killing our people and destroying our ships. Brutus turned to face the main display, which showed his fleet positions around the planet. Red dots marked ships that had been lost or damaged. There were too many red dots. Have we identified the attackers? No, sir. We have found no trace of enemy ships or weapons. Whatever is hunting us moves without being seen and strikes without warning. On the other side of the system, Jack Morrison floated in space near a small asteroid, completely invisible in his stealth suit. Through his rifle scope, he watched a Horde commander walk across the bridge of a heavy cruiser 3 miles away. Jack smiled and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle made no sound, and the projectile traveled through space faster than light. The Horde commander's head exploded like a ripe fruit, spraying green blood across the bridge windows. The other Horde warriors on the bridge looked around in panic, trying to understand what had happened. They never saw the second shot that killed their weapons officer, or the third shot that destroyed their main computer. Meanwhile, Lisa Chen was inside another Horde vessel, moving through the ventilation system like a deadly spider. She had been inside the ship for 2 hours, placing small explosive devices in critical locations. The bombs were so small that the ship's sensors could not detect them, but they were powerful enough to tear the vessel apart. She activated the timer and smiled. In 30 minutes, this ship would become a cloud of expanding metal and dead bodies. By then, she would be inside another vessel, preparing more surprises. Viktor Petrov preferred a more direct approach. He boarded Horde ships during shift changes, when the corridors were crowded with warriors moving to their stations. He moved through the crowds like a force of nature, killing silently with his bare hands. The Horde warriors never knew what hit them. One moment they were walking to their posts, and the next moment they were dead on the floor with their necks broken. Victor would disappear back into the ventilation systems, before anyone realized what had happened. The other 47 humans spread similar chaos throughout the Horde fleet. Maria Santos poisoned water supplies, causing entire crews to die slow, painful deaths. Tom Blake hacked into ship computers and turned their own weapons against them. Anna Wolf captured Horde officers and tortured information out of them before, killing them in creative ways. Each human worked alone, but together they created a symphony of terror that shook the Crimson Horde to its core. Warriors who had conquered dozens of star systems began to fear the darkness in their own ships. They jumped at shadows and slept with weapons in their hands. War Master Brutus called an emergency meeting of his ship commanders. 30 of the Horde's most experienced officers gathered in the flagship's main conference room. They were all battle-tested veterans who had never known fear. "We are being hunted," Brutus said without introduction. "Something is moving through our fleet, killing our people, and destroying our ships. Oh, what are your recommendations?" The commanders looked at each other nervously. Captain Grack was the first to speak. "Sir, perhaps we should withdraw from this system. We have already taken heavy losses, and the enemy appears to have superior stealth technology." "Withdraw?" Brutus roared. "Ah!" "The Crimson Horde does not retreat from anyone." "But sir," said another commander, "we do not even know what we are fighting. How can we defend against an enemy we cannot see?" Brutus was about to respond when the lights in the conference room suddenly went out. In the darkness, they could hear sounds that made their blood freeze. Quiet footsteps, heavy breathing, and the wet sound of something sharp cutting through flesh. When the emergency lights came on 30 seconds later, half the commanders were dead on the floor. The survivors looked around in terror, but they saw no sign of their attackers. War Master Brutus stared at the bodies of his best officers and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear, real, cold fear that made his hands shake and his heart race. Somewhere in the darkness of space, 50 humans continued their deadly work, turning the hunters into the H. The siege of Vega had turned into a nightmare that haunted the dreams of every Crimson Horde warrior. What had started as a simple conquest had become a horror story that spread fear through the entire fleet. It's the mighty Horde, which had destroyed 47 star systems without mercy, was now being hunted by invisible demons. War Master Brutus stood in his private chambers, staring at the tactical display that showed his shrinking fleet. In 2 weeks, he had lost 60 ships and 12,000 warriors. The worst part was that he still had no idea what was killing his people. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. He turned to see Captain Scar, his intelligence officer, standing in the doorway. The smaller warrior looked exhausted, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "What is it now?" Brutus asked, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. More ships went silent during the night shift. The heavy cruiser Bone Crusher, the destroyer Night Terror, and the supply ship Blood Drinker. All crews dead, all computer systems destroyed. Brutus felt a cold rage building in his chest. Is this possible? We have increased security, doubled the guards, and installed new detection systems. How are they still getting through? Captain Scar hesitated before answering. "Sir, I think we are dealing with something we have never faced before. These attackers move like ghosts, kill like demons, and disappear like smoke. They are not like any enemy we have fought." "What are you saying?" "I think we are fighting humans, sir," Brutus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Humans, those weak traitors and diplomats. They could not hurt a child, much less warriors of the Horde. "Sir, I have been studying the attack patterns. The methods used are not random. They show intelligence, planning, and a deep understanding of fear. Someone is deliberately terrorizing our people." Far from the flagship, Jack Morrison moved through the asteroid belt like a hunting shark. His stealth suit made him invisible to all sensors, and his custom rifle could kill from distances that seemed impossible. He had been tracking a Horde patrol for 3 hours, waiting for the perfect moment. The patrol consisted of 4 ships, moving in formation through the rocky field. Jack had already identified the lead ship's captain through his scope. The warrior was standing on his bridge, giving orders to his crew. Jack aimed carefully and fired. The projectile crossed 3 miles of space in less than a second, punching through the bridge window and taking the captain's head clean off. Before the crew could react, Jack had already moved to a new position. His second shot killed the weapons officer.
Wow, the third shot.
Destroyed the navigation computer. The fourth shot hit the ship's communication array, cutting them off from the rest of the fleet. The Horde crew panicked, firing their weapons blindly into space, while trying to find their invisible attacker. But Jack was already gone, moving to his next target. On the second ship, the crew watched in horror as their lead vessel spun out of control, its bridge covered in green blood. They tried to help, but then their own captain suddenly dropped dead with a hole through his chest. Jack worked methodically, picking off officers and destroying critical systems on each ship. Within an hour, all 4 vessels were drifting helplessly in space, their crews dead or dying. Lisa Chen had a different approach to spreading terror. She specialized in turning the Horde's own ships into weapons against them. Her current target was a massive battlecruiser called the Painbringer, which carried over 2,000 warriors. Lisa had been inside the ship for 6 hours, moving through the ventilation system and maintenance tunnels like a deadly spider. She had placed explosive devices throughout the vessel, but not the kind that would simply destroy it. Special bombs designed to create maximum fear and confusion. The first explosion came in the ship's dining hall during the evening meal. A small device detonated under one of the tables, not enough to kill anyone, but enough to spray the room with smoke and debris. The Horde warriors jumped to their feet, reaching for weapons and looking around for enemies. Before they could react, the second explosion came from the opposite side of the room.
Oh.
Then a third from the ceiling, and a fourth from the floor. The warriors found themselves trapped in a room filled with smoke and flying metal, being attacked from all directions by an enemy they could not see. Lisa watched through a ventilation grate as the mighty Horde warriors cowered under tables, and behind chairs too terrified to move. She smiled and activated the next series of explosions in the ship's barracks. Meanwhile, Viktor Petrov was conducting his own form of psychological warfare. He had boarded the Horde destroyer Black Fang. During a shift change, disguising himself as a maintenance worker, his massive frame was hidden under loose coveralls, and his face was covered by a work mask. Victor walked through the ship's corridors, noting the locations of guards and security cameras. He had memorized the ship's layout from stolen technical documents, and he knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. His first target was the ship's security chief, a huge Horde warrior named Thok, who was known for his cruelty. Victor found him alone in his office, reviewing security reports. "Excuse me, sir," Victor said in broken Horde language. "Problem with air recycling system." Thok looked up with annoyance. "What kind of problem?" Victor stepped closer, his hands hidden behind his back. "Very serious problem, need to show you." When Thok stood up to follow him, Victor struck. His massive hands closed around the security chief's neck, lifting him off the ground. Thok tried to scream, but no sound came out. His eyes bulged as Victor's fingers crushed his windpipe. Victor held him there for a full minute, watching the life drain from his eyes. Then he laid the body carefully on the floor and walked away, leaving no trace of his presence except for the dead security chief. Over the next hour, Victor moved through the ship like a silent death. He killed the weapons officer in the bathroom, breaking his neck with a single twist. He strangled the navigation officer in the supply closet, leaving the body hanging from a storage hook. He crushed the communication officer's skull with his bare hands, then stuffed the body into a ventilation shaft. Each death was silent, brutal, and calculated to create maximum fear when the bodies were discovered. Victor knew that finding their colleagues dead in impossible places would drive the surviving crew members to madness. The other 47 humans spread similar chaos throughout the Horde fleet. Maria Santos had poisoned the water supplies on 6 different ships, causing hundreds of warriors to die in agony. Tom Blake had hacked into the fleet's computer network, turning their own defense systems against them. Anna Wolf had captured a dozen Horde officers and was slowly torturing them to death while broadcasting their screams over the ship's communication system. Each human worked with the skills that had made them too dangerous for Earth's prisons. They were artists of violence, painting their masterpieces with Horde blood across the canvas of space. The psychological effect was devastating. Horde warriors who had never known fear, now jumped at shadows. They slept with weapons in their hands and refused to walk through their own ships alone. Some had nervous breakdowns and had to be sedated. Others became violent and attacked their own crewmates. Captain Grax stood on the bridge of his destroyer, watching his crew with growing concern. His warriors, who had once been proud and confident, now looked like frightened children. They kept looking over their shoulders and starting at every sound. "Sir," said his communication officer, "we are receiving reports from the entire fleet. Morale is collapsing. Some ships are reporting mutinies. Others are asking permission to abandon their posts." Grack nodded grimly. "What about the enemy? Have we learned anything about them?" "Only that they are humans, sir. The few survivors who have seen them describe creatures that move like shadows and kill like demons. They seem to enjoy causing fear and pain." On the flagship, War Master Brutus called an emergency meeting of his remaining commanders. Only 12 ship captains answered the call, down from the original 30. The others were either dead or too afraid to leave their ships. "We are facing an enemy unlike anything in our history," Brutus said, his voice echoing in the nearly empty conference room. "These humans fight with methods that we do not understand, use fear as a weapon more effectively than we ever have." Captain Vox, commander of the battlecruiser Skullcrusher, leaned forward. "Sir, perhaps we should consider negotiation. We could offer them tribute in exchange for safe passage out of this system." Brutus roared with anger. "The Crimson Horde does not negotiate with prey. We are the hunters, not the hunted." "But sir," said another captain, "we have lost a quarter of our fleet. Our warriors are terrified. Some are refusing to leave their quarters. How can we fight an enemy that turns our own ships into prisons of fear?" Brutus looked around the table. At his remaining commanders, he could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear that was spreading through his entire fleet like a plague. For the first time in his life, he began to wonder if the Crimson Horde had finally met its match. In the darkness of space, 50 humans continued their deadly work, each one a master of their chosen form of violence. They moved through the Horde fleet like a virus, spreading death and terror wherever they went. The galaxy's most feared warriors were learning what it meant to be afraid. The end came not with a great battle, but with a massacre that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. After 6 weeks of terror, the mighty Crimson Horde fleet had been reduced to less than 40 ships. What remained of their forces clustered around War Master Brutus's flagship like frightened children hiding behind their father. Brutus stood in his command center, staring at displays that showed nothing but death and destruction. His once proud fleet was gone, destroyed by an enemy he had never seen. His warriors, who had conquered star systems without fear, now trembled at shadows and jumped at every sound. "Sir," said Captain Scar, his voice barely above a whisper, "we are receiving surrender requests from 12 more ships. Their crews are refusing to fight." Brutus turned slowly to look at his intelligence officer. The mighty warrior who had once struck fear into entire civilizations now looked like a broken old man. His armor was dented, his mask was cracked, and his eyes were filled with a terror that went deeper than bone. "Surrender?" Brutus asked, his voice hollow. "The Crimson Horde does not surrender. Sir, we have lost over 90% of our fleet. Our remaining warriors are on the edge of madness. Some have started killing themselves rather than face the humans." Through the bridge windows, they could see the Viridian homeworld spinning peacefully in space. The planet that had once been their target now seemed like a distant dream. All Brutus wanted now was to escape this cursed system with whatever remained of his people. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure," he ordered. "Leave this place." But the humans were not finished with them yet. Jack Morrison floated in space near the edge of the system, his rifle trained on the Horde flagship. Through his scope, he could see Brutus standing on the bridge, giving orders to his crew. Jack had been saving this shot for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. He smiled and gently squeezed the trigger. The projectile crossed the empty space between them faster than thought, punching through the reinforced bridge window and striking Brutus in the chest. The War Master stumbled backward, green blood spreading across his armor. But the shot was not meant to kill. Jack had aimed carefully to wound, not to end the terror too quickly. He wanted Brutus to suffer, to know what it felt like to be hunted by something more dangerous than himself. Brutus looked down at the hole in his chest, then up at the shattered window. Somewhere out there in the darkness, death was watching. Him. Waiting for him. Playing with him like a cat plays with a mouse. "Get us out of here," he screamed to his crew. "Maximum speed." Now, the remaining Horde ships began to move toward the edge of the system, but they never made it to safety. The humans had been waiting for this moment, when the enemy would try to run. Now they could finish what they had started. Lisa Chen had spent the last week planting explosive devices throughout the fleeing ships. As the Horde vessels picked up speed trying to reach the jump point that would take them to hyperspace, the bombs began to detonate. The first explosion tore through the engine room of the heavy cruiser Painbringer. The ship lurched to one side, its engines failing, before a secondary explosion ripped it completely apart. 2,000 warriors died in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. The destroyer Blackfang lasted 3 more minutes before Lisa's bombs turned it into a cloud of expanding metal and body parts. The battlecruiser Skullcrusher managed to send out a brief distress call before its own explosives detonated, silencing the crew forever. One by one, the fleeing ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Each explosion was perfectly timed to create maximum psychological impact on the survivors. The humans wanted the remaining Horde warriors to know that there was no escape, no mercy, and no hope. Viktor Petrov was aboard the flagship itself, moving through the corridors like a force of nature. The remaining crew members tried to stop him, but they might as well have tried to stop an earthquake with their bare hands. He broke through a security checkpoint, killing 6 guards with his bare hands in less than 30 seconds. He crushed a warrior's skull against a bulkhead, then picked up the body and threw it through a group of reinforcements. He moved like a hurricane of violence, leaving death and destruction in his wake. The other warriors fled before him, but there was nowhere to run. Victor knew every inch of the ship, and he was hunting them methodically, room by room, level by level. In the ship's armory, he found a group of 20 warriors trying to make a last stand. They had barricaded themselves behind weapon lockers and were firing everything they had at the entrance. But Victor did not come through the door. He came through the ceiling, dropping down among them like a demon from hell. His massive hands closed around the nearest warrior's throat, crushing the life out of him while using the body as a shield against the other's weapons. The fight lasted less than 5 minutes. When it was over, 20 of the Horde's best warriors lay dead on the floor, and Victor was walking away without a scratch. Meanwhile, the other 47 humans continued their work throughout the system. They hunted down every fleeing ship, every escape pod, every survivor who tried to hide among the asteroids. This was not a battle anymore. It was an extermination. Maria Santos used her poisons to contaminate the air supplies of 3 ships, causing their crews to die in agony over several hours. Tom Blake turned the ship's own weapons against them, making them fire on each other until nothing was left but wreckage. Anna Wolf broadcasted the screams of captured officers over every communication channel, letting the survivors know what was waiting for them. On the Viridian homeworld below, Ambassador Kale stood in the ruins of his capital city, watching the lights in the sky. Each flash meant another Horde ship was dying. Another group of warriors was being eliminated by their human saviors. But as he watched, Kale began to feel something other than gratitude. The humans were not just defeating the Crimson Horde. They were destroying them completely, showing no mercy, taking no prisoners, leaving nothing alive. "They are monsters," whispered one of his aides, a young Viridian named Tal who had survived the bombing of the eastern cities. Kale nodded slowly.
Yes.
"But they are our monsters." In space, the massacre was reaching its climax. Only War Master Brutus's flagship remained, drifting helplessly with its engines destroyed and its crew dead, or dying. Viktor Petrov had killed most of the warriors aboard, while the others had hidden themselves in the deepest parts of the ship. Brutus sat alone in his command center, surrounded by the bodies of his officers. Green blood covered the walls and floor, and the air stank of death and fear. His chest wound was getting worse, and he could feel his life slowly draining away. With shaking hands, he activated the ship's communication system and sent out a message on all frequencies. It was a message that would be heard across the galaxy, carried by every ship and station that monitored the emergency channels. "This is War Master Brutus of the Crimson Horde," he said, his voice weak but clear. "For 300 years, my people have conquered and destroyed without mercy. We have burned worlds and enslaved civilizations. Thought we were the most dangerous beings in the galaxy." Paused, coughing up blood before continuing. "We were wrong. We have met something worse than us. Something that makes us look like children playing at war. The humans. ... They are not warriors. They are death itself. They do not fight battles. They create nightmares." Another pause, longer this time. "I send this warning to all who can hear. Me. Never anger the humans. Never threaten what they protect. They will not simply defeat you. They will erase you from existence, and they will enjoy doing it." The transmission ended abruptly as Viktor Petrov entered the command center. Looked up at the massive human and tried to speak, but Viktor's hands closed around his throat before he could say a word. The last War Master of the Crimson Horde died quietly, his neck snapping like a dry branch. Viktor looked around the ruined command center, then activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. The flagship exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from the surface of the Viridian homeworld. With its destruction, the Crimson Horde ceased to exist. 300 years of conquest and terror had ended in 6 weeks of systematic extermination. Captain Ross stood on the bridge of Pandora's box, watching the last explosion fade into darkness. Behind him, the 50 humans who had destroyed an entire civilization were cleaning their weapons and preparing for the journey home. "Mission accomplished," said Jack Morrison, disassembling his rifle with practiced ease. "That was fun," added Lisa Chen, counting her unused explosives with disappointment. Viktor Petrov said nothing, but his smile was visible even through the blood that covered his face. Captain Ross activated the ship's communication system and sent a brief message to Earth. Package delivered. No human casualties. Returning home. As Pandora's box prepared to jump to hyperspace, the Viridian people began the long process of rebuilding their civilization. They had been saved, but they would never forget the price of that salvation. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. Humanity was not just another peaceful species. There was something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And somewhere in the darkness of space, other predator races began to reconsider their plans for expansion. The monsters had shown their true faces, and the